Okay guys, this is my totally ratcheted up way of doing an online lecture. My computer will not do video screen captures because it's lame. Okay, so Sistine Chapel. You'll notice that it focuses on the ceiling frescoes, and that's obviously what we're going to really concentrate on, although there are other parts to the chapel that are of note that I think could become helpful to you in the process of essay writing. I don't mean necessarily my essay writing, and I don't necessarily mean not my essay writing, but could come in handy at some point. So first of all, the chapel was built by Sixtus IV, not Sixtus. It was a private chapel for the Pope and the Papal Court. This is also still the place where all the cardinals meet in order to elect the new Pope. Initially, it had a dark blue ceiling with gold stars. So there wasn't much to the ceiling before Michelangelo came along, but Julius II, who's also the same Pope who commissioned School of Athens, so you know these two things were happening at the same time. Julius II asked Michelangelo to do this. He was fairly resistant because, initially at least, because he really thought of himself exclusively as a sculptor, not a painter, but as you will be able to see in the human figures there, his depictions of the human body are very muscular. They are there's a lot of movement in them, and so they really are quite sculptural. Michelangelo, in his youth, actually got to study human corpses. Actually, that was against the church rules, and so he had to strike a deal. He would sculpt a crucifix, a special crucifix for some church if they let him mess around with corpses to study their anatomy. And you'll see when you look at the bodies that he makes how we can really see where the muscles are. That's really his strength, you know, in terms of showing muscles and musculature. So, and they use the word sculpturesque. I'm going to use a lot of adjectives. I'm going to try to use a lot of adjectives because I'm finding in your writing, when it asks you to describe, people aren't using adjectives, and adjectives are the only way you can actually describe things. You can't just state that it's there and think that that's will take the place of description. Description, you need to describe, okay? All right, so so as a sculptor having to do painting, he was really able to translate that three-dimensional into two-dimensional. We've been focusing on, or that three-dimensional into two-dimensional in a three-dimensional suggested way. We've been focusing on linear perspective with respect to, you know, getting that 3D out in the 2D format, but it's really his construction of the body that we're interested in here, because we'll notice that the backgrounds to his paintings on the ceiling here, the fresco on the ceiling, the backgrounds are not much. They really don't show much linear perspective, if any at all, but that's not what we're interested in here. We're interested in the depiction of the body. So added difficulties to the fact that he is he does not think of himself as a painter, are the fact that he's having to do this basically lying down. You know, he did some of it standing up, but a lot of it lying down. That's got to be hard. And the fact that the ceiling is actually a curved surface. It's not a totally flat surface. So he's going to have to make it so that when you are on the floor, it looks flat to you. Now, it can't look flat everywhere. Not every image can look flat if you're just standing in one spot. This is what's called a quadro riportato, right? So that the idea, or the phrase means transported paintings. So the idea is that it's like taking a regular painting in a frame and sticking it up on the ceiling. The deal is, though, you have to stand in a particular spot in order to see the image as it's supposed to be seen. So for example, if you were at the south end or of the chapel, you couldn't look at the images on the north end and have them be perspectively correct. You have to stand closer to the north end. So that should be pretty obvious, I think. All right, so I mentioned, I think in class, that it's not just Michelangelo's work in the Sistine Chapel. So there were other paintings working in the Sistine Chapel before Michelangelo showed up. It's just when Julius II wanted to, basically a crack appeared in the ceiling and he decided to have the whole ceiling redone. So that's why he hired Michelangelo. But the frescoes on the walls were still in okay shape. And so you'll notice on the southern wall, it has listed here, it focuses on stories of Moses. You'll, pardon my finger, if you look at the trees here, it should remind you of Botticelli, because those look like Botticelli's trees, and this is in fact Botticelli. So this is another example of, just because linear perspective is being used, not everybody takes full advantage of it, because we know that's not Botticelli's thing. He's not interested so much in the linear perspective. Not that it's really off, it's just that it's obviously not the focus. But as you can see in Delivery of the Keys, which I showed you in class, we have the really strict linear perspective there. And that is part of the northern wall, which shows stories of Jesus. And you can kind of read through that to see the different stories. Okay. Not that you would need to memorize them, but you would need to know, Moses, Jesus, etc. In the Eastern Wall, I don't have images here. We have resurrection of Christ and the disputation over Moses' body. The Western Wall has the altar fresco of the Last Judgement of Michelangelo's. And I'll get to that in a minute. There's actually a video for Khan Academy, which you should watch because they are a whole lot smarter and more knowledgeable than I am. So here we have the image that everybody knows, the creation of Adam. God in this shape that looks kind of like a brain. God reaching out to touch Adam's hand, but also Adam himself reaching out to touch God's hand. Yes, he's kind of lacking in energy there, given the state of his body. But this is actually the first depiction where we see that of the creation of Adam. This is this first kind of image like this, where Adam himself also reaches out to God, not God just reaching out to Adam. So you want to think about, okay, that's really interesting and significant given the humanism we've been focusing on, right? So I'm not going to tell you what that means. You should be able to kind of put two and two together here and make some meaning of that. You'll also notice that, here's Eve. She looks kind of scared. She's hiding behind God. Now, is this a literal interpretation of what is depicted in Genesis? No. But if everything were literal, the world would be super duper boring, right? So it's not literal. This is one artist's imaginative interpretation. Okay? All right, so the Sistine Chapel is actually laid out very particularly. I don't know how well you can read this. This PowerPoint will be up also on the Google Classroom. So we have, the image of the chapel here. Here we have the layout of the ceiling, what's on the ceiling. And the ceiling is just depicts, in terms of the stories, that's biblical stories that go here, or along the center, it's only Old Testament stuff. There is no New Testament stuff in the ceiling. None. Okay? Focusing here, we'll start here. It's God divides light from darkness. God creates man and plants. God divides water from the earth. Okay? Oh, moon and plants, not man and plants. So that's basic creation, sorry. So the creation just of the universe. And then in the green, we have God creates Adam, then Eve. And then, of course, when they get together and the serpent gets involved, we have this image of original sin and them being expelled from the Garden of Eden for having disobeyed God's command. There's just, there's one tree, don't mess with it. And they went ahead and messed with it. Right. We'll look at that image. Then we have 3 stories of Noah. Sacrifice of Noah, the flood, and the drunkenness of Noah. The drunkenness of Noah is essentially he gets drunk, and he's got some sons, and one son finds out he's drunk, and then goes out to get people to come and look at him. But the other, the other good son kind of figures out his dad is drunk, and then grabs a covering and goes in without looking at his father and covers his father up. So of course the bad son is showing the story indicative of a lack of not honoring your parents, and then we have the good son who is honoring his parents. Along the walls we have, or the sides here, we have a number of different kinds of things. We have I'll talk the pendentives. We know what pendentives are, right? Different stories. We have David slaying Goliath, Judith slaying Holofernes. That's a really cool one. Moses and the brazen or bronze serpent, and the punishment of Haman. In addition to that, we have in these kind of blue, in the blue with the pointy kind of triangular, those are all the descendants of, or excuse me, the ancestors of Christ, excuse me. These are all the people, the biblical figures that if you follow the line, so-and-so begat so-and-so, who begat so-and-so, lead up to Joseph or Mary, who is, of course, Christ's kind of foster father, because Christ's father is understood to be God, right? Because Mary was impregnated by this Holy Spirit. So we have the descendants of Christ. Of course, that's all clearly going to be Old Testament stuff. And then what's most interesting, I think, are the variations between this pink and this orange, which are both prophets from the Old Testament and Sibyls from mythology and legend. And Sybil is a woman in ancient times supposed to utter the oracles and prophecies of a god, a woman able to foretell the future. This image is of the Delphic Sybil, and she is the oracle right at the center pop of the world, understood to be descended from Poseidon and a sister to Apollo. Again, this is all in legend, right? But the idea here was that even in pre-Christian times, even in pagan areas in pre-Christian times, not the Israelites, not the chosen people, right? You have messengers that indicate that Christ will be coming. And so these Sibyls throughout time would deliver messages from God foretelling the coming of Christ. And so again, we see that mixture of classical mythology and Christianity, right? Because the idea is we don't want to throw away the classics. We can make them fit. Okay, so that is one of the pendentives. That is Judith carrying away Holofernes' head. She has just slayed Holofernes. He was, he was one of our ancient Near Eastern. I think he was Abyssinian, I think. Anyway, so she is an Israelite. She kind of worms her way into his life, and then she cuts his head off. It's an awesome Caravaggio depicting that. Okay, so the flood. This is a featured image for Sistine Chapel, okay? So we see here, and I'm going to try and speed it up because I know this is going on long. Noah's family floats at I don't know. They're on the ark over here. Everybody else is suffering. And here's another example of what I'm talking about, kind of the plain background. There's really not much to this background with respect to linear perspective, but if you look at the bodies, that is what we want to look at. Okay, so we have some people scrambling on to trying to get on a tree, other people trying to get on shelter on a mountain, these guys in some kind of boat that's about to capsize. These guys, even out here, it seems like they're trying to scramble onto Noah's Ark. That's not going to work. I think this is Noah sticking his head out. Yeah, all right. There's a close-up of the people scrambling for the tree. You see what I mean about sculptural depictions of the body, very muscular, full of actual distortion, right? Twisting and turning and movement. And you can absolutely see how he influenced Raphael's School of Athens, because if you look at Raphael's, earlier work and his early depictions of the body and look at School of Athens, you can tell he has been looking at the Sistine Chapel, just because those bodies in School of Athens just have more volume, more musculature than the ones prior. Okay, so another one. This is original sin, otherwise known as the fall, right? Fall from grace and the expulsion of Eden. You can see, so the serpent is kind of depicted as serpent body, but human upper part. When Adam and Eve are here, they're, relatively pleasant looking, although they're about to do something they shouldn't do, right? But when they've been expelled, you can see the darkness has come upon them. They both look far more haggard, in greater shadow. Their postures, especially hers, are lowered and kind of wretched. So this is all in one panel, so two contrasting scenes in one panel. All right, so Last Judgment. You have a Khan Academy video about this, so you need to watch that because they'll go into great detail. This is kind of a really trippy work. This one happens, so between the ceiling frescoes and the altar fresco, we have the Protestant Reformation, okay? So we have Martin Luther's 95 Theses, and so the church basically comes under fire for a lot of things, and begins to lose members. This, I think, so the Last Judgment is not commissioned by Julius II, it's by Pope Paul III, 24 years after the sealing. We see with this piece, there's a real tone shift for Michelangelo. Yes, there's some this is darker material in the sense this is the Last Judgment and the damned are going to go down into hell. But, there really seems to be, this is a darker vision of the world than is depicted in the ceiling frescoes. We see the influence of Dante's Inferno still. We had that, of course, in the Arena Chapel Last Judgment as well. I'm not going to say much more about that because you have a video, and I've gone on way too long. So the last thing I will say is I recommend that you do some extra thinking. And my extra thinking is, we have some ideals of Renaissance, which are strongly influenced by humanism, freedom of thought, the importance of a thinking mind, belief in humanity as dignified and responsible, the emphasis placed on beauty and individuality, precise composition and order. So I would look at the scenes that we just discussed one way, and I contemplate how one of them reflects at least three of the above ideals. I would also recommend just, finding a website. It's easy to finding a website and looking at all the different panels. You don't have to research all of them, but you can just see the breadth and the variety of the works. It's really astounding. And that's it. And I will try to make these in the future a lot shorter and less verbose. Okay, thanks very much. Good luck.